The morning started like any other at Buckingham Palace. The golden sunlight streamed through the tall windows as Sarah Mitchell, a dedicated royal guard with 15 years of service, began her routine security rounds. She had always taken pride in her work, protecting the royal family with unwavering loyalty and attention to detail. As Sarah walked through the ornate corridors, she noticed something unusual in the Queen Consort's private chambers. The door was slightly ajar, which was odd since Camilla had left for an official engagement an hour earlier. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She approached cautiously, her hand instinctively moving toward her radio. Inside the room, everything appeared normal at first glance. The elegant furniture stood in perfect order, and the morning light cast peaceful shadows across the Persian rugs. But something caught Sarah's eye near the antique jewelry box on Camilla's dressing table. The ornate wooden box, which usually remained securely locked, was open. Sarah's heart began to race as she moved closer to investigate. She knew this jewelry box contained some of Kate's most precious pieces, items that had been temporarily stored there for safekeeping during renovations at Kensington Palace. Among them were a pair of diamond earrings that had belonged to Princess Diana, a sapphire bracelet gifted by the Queen, and a delicate pearl necklace with significant sentimental value. As Sarah examined the jewelry box more carefully, her worst fears were confirmed. The pearl necklace was missing. She immediately secured the scene and contacted her supervisor, knowing that the discovery of missing royal jewelry would send shockwaves through the palace. Within minutes, the palace security team arrived. Chief Inspector Reynolds, a stern man with gray hair and decades of experience in royal protection, took charge of the situation. He questioned Sarah thoroughly about her discovery, taking detailed notes of every observation she had made. The investigation began immediately. Security footage was reviewed, and staff members who had access to that wing of the palace were interviewed. The initial findings were troubling. The cameras showed Camilla entering and leaving her chambers alone, but there was a gap in the footage during the early morning hours when the system was briefly offline for routine maintenance. As news of the missing jewelry spread through the palace staff, whispers and speculation began to circulate. Some questioned whether it could have been an inside job, while others wondered if there had been a security breach from outside. The atmosphere became tense, with everyone feeling under suspicion. Sarah found herself in a difficult position. As the guard who discovered the theft, she was both a key witness and, unfortunately, a potential suspect. She cooperated fully with the investigation, providing detailed statements and submitting to background checks, but the weight of suspicion was beginning to affect her daily duties. The royal family was informed of the situation with utmost discretion. Kate, who was attending a charity event in London, was quietly notified about her missing necklace. The news deeply upset her, not just because of the jewelry's monetary value, but because of its emotional significance. The pearl necklace had been a wedding gift from William's grandmother, and Kate treasured it as a symbol of her acceptance into the royal family. Meanwhile, Camilla returned from her engagement to find the palace buzzing with quiet activity. When informed of the missing jewelry, she was genuinely shocked and immediately offered her full cooperation with the investigation. She allowed security teams to search her chambers thoroughly and provided a detailed account of her movements that morning. The investigation expanded beyond the immediate palace staff. Background checks were conducted on recent visitors, maintenance workers, and anyone who might have had access to the area. The pressure to solve the case quickly was immense, as the royal family could not afford any negative publicity or suggestions of security failures. As the first day of investigation concluded, Chief Inspector Reynolds found himself with more questions than answers. The missing necklace seemed to have vanished without a trace, and the lack of clear evidence was frustrating everyone involved. The case was becoming more complex by the hour, and the inspector knew that time was working against them. Sarah returned to her quarters that evening feeling exhausted and worried. She had dedicated her career to protecting the royal family, and now she felt as though she had failed in her duty. The missing jewelry represented more than just a theft. It was a breach of the trust and security that the royal household depended upon. Unknown to everyone involved in the investigation, the real story behind the missing necklace was far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The truth would eventually surface, but not before accusations flew and relationships were tested in ways that would change the dynamics within the palace forever. As night fell over Buckingham Palace, the investigation continued quietly behind closed doors. Security teams worked through the night, reviewing every piece of evidence and following every possible lead. The missing pearl necklace had become more than just a case of theft. It had become a matter of royal security and family honor that demanded immediate resolution. 3 days had passed since the discovery of the missing pearl necklace, and the investigation had reached a frustrating standstill. Chief Inspector Reynolds had exhausted most conventional leads, and the pressure from palace officials was mounting. The royal family needed answers, and they needed them quickly. Sarah Mitchell found herself increasingly isolated as whispers continued to circulate among the palace staff. Despite her clean record and years of faithful service, some colleagues began to view her with suspicion. The stress was taking its toll on her performance, and she struggled to maintain her usual professional demeanor during her shifts. It was during this tense period that a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Detective Constable James Harrison, a young officer recently assigned to the Royal Protection Unit, was reviewing security footage from a different angle when he noticed something peculiar. While examining recordings from the palace gardens, he spotted a figure moving near the service entrance during the early morning hours when the jewelry went missing. The figure was small and moved with the casual confidence of someone familiar with the palace grounds. As James enhanced the footage, he realized he was looking at a child. The timestamp showed the movement occurred around the same time the necklace disappeared, but the connection seemed impossible to make. James brought his findings to Chief Inspector Reynolds, who initially dismissed the observation as irrelevant. Children were occasionally present in the palace when staff members brought family for special occasions, but they were always closely supervised and had no access to private royal chambers. However, James persisted in his investigation. He cross-referenced the timing with staff schedules and discovered that Maria Santos, one of Camilla's personal housekeeping staff, had requested permission to bring her 8-year-old grandson, Lucas, to the palace that morning. Maria had worked at the palace for over a decade and was trusted implicitly. Her request to bring Lucas for a brief visit while she completed some urgent cleaning duties had been approved without question. The revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation team. The idea that a child might be connected to the theft seemed almost absurd, but the evidence was beginning to point in that direction. Chief Inspector Reynolds reluctantly agreed to question Maria about her grandson's visit. When approached, Maria was initially defensive and confused. She insisted that Lucas had been with her the entire time and had never left her sight. The boy was well behaved and had simply sat quietly in the staff break room while she worked. The suggestion that he might be involved in stealing royal jewelry seemed impossible to her. However, when pressed for more details, Maria's story began to show some inconsistencies. She admitted that there had been a brief period when Lucas had asked to use the restroom and had been gone for about 10 minutes. She had thought nothing of it at the time, assuming he had simply gotten lost in the large palace corridors. The investigation team decided to interview Lucas directly, but they needed to handle the situation delicately. The boy was only 8 years old, and the implications of his potential involvement in royal theft were serious. Child psychologists were brought in to ensure that any questioning was conducted appropriately and without causing trauma to the young boy. Lucas Santos was a bright child with curious eyes and an innocent demeanor that made the accusations against him seem even more unbelievable. When gently questioned about his visit to the palace, He initially provided simple, straightforward answers about his time in the break room and his brief trip to find the bathroom. However, as the questioning continued with patience and understanding, Lucas began to reveal more details about his adventure through the palace corridors. He described getting lost and wandering through beautiful rooms filled with fancy furniture and pretty things. His description matched the layout of the wing where Camilla's chambers were located. The breakthrough came when one of the psychologists asked Lucas about anything pretty or shiny he might have seen during his walk. The boy's eyes lit up as he described finding a room with a beautiful wooden box full of sparkly jewelry. He explained that the box was open and that one particularly pretty necklace with white beads had caught his attention. Lucas's account of what happened next was delivered with the innocent honesty that only a child could possess. He explained that the necklace was so beautiful and reminded him of one his deceased mother used to wear. Acting on pure childhood impulse and without understanding the significance of what he was doing, Lucas had taken the necklace, intending to show it to his grandmother. However, when Lucas realized he might be in trouble for taking something that wasn't his, he became scared and hid the necklace in his pocket. By the time he returned to his grandmother, he was too frightened to tell her what he had done. Instead, he kept the necklace hidden, planning to find a way to return it without getting in trouble. The revelation that an 8-year-old child was responsible for the theft that had paralyzed palace security for 3 days was both shocking and somewhat relieving. Lucas had not acted with malicious intent or as part of any organized crime. He was simply a curious child who had made a mistake and was too scared to admit it. Chief Inspector Reynolds found himself in an unprecedented situation. The case that had threatened to become a major security scandal was actually the result of childhood curiosity and innocent mistake. However, the implications were still serious, and the necklace needed to be recovered immediately. When confronted with the truth about her grandson's actions, Maria Santos was devastated. She had raised Lucas since his mother's death 2 years earlier and had always taught him the importance of honesty and respect for others' property. The thought that he had taken something belonging to the royal family filled her with shame and fear for her job. The palace officials faced a delicate decision about how to handle the situation. On one hand, Lucas was just a child who had made an innocent mistake. On the other hand, the theft of royal jewelry, regardless of intent, was a serious matter that could not be ignored. Sarah Mitchell felt a tremendous sense of relief when the truth finally emerged. Her reputation and career had been under threat, and she had begun to doubt her own abilities as a guard. The revelation that the theft was committed by a child rather than a security breach or inside job validated her professionalism and dedication to her duties. As the second phase of this unusual case drew to a close, all eyes turned to the recovery of Kate's precious pearl necklace and the resolution of what would become known as one of the most unusual theft cases in palace history. The moment of truth had arrived. Chief Inspector Reynolds, accompanied by a child psychologist and Maria Santos, sat with 8-year-old Lucas in a comfortable room at the palace. The atmosphere was gentle but serious, as they explained to the young boy that they knew about the necklace and that he would not be in trouble if he helped them return it. Lucas listened with wide eyes, his small hands fidgeting in his lap. The weight of what he had done was beginning to sink in, even though he didn't fully understand the magnitude of taking jewelry that belonged to a princess. When asked where the necklace was now, Lucas looked down at his shoes and whispered that it was hidden in his bedroom at home. Maria Santos felt her world crashing down around her. Her job at the palace was not just employment, it was a source of pride and stability for her and her grandson. She had worked hard to build a reputation as a trustworthy and reliable member of the palace staff, and now her grandson's innocent mistake threatened to destroy everything she had worked for. A small team was immediately dispatched to Maria's modest apartment in London to retrieve the necklace. Lucas led them to his bedroom, where he had carefully hidden Kate's pearl necklace inside a small wooden box that had belonged to his mother. The sight of the precious royal jewelry nestled among a child's treasured possessions was both touching and heartbreaking. When the necklace was safely recovered and returned to the palace, Kate was immediately notified. Her relief was immense, not just because the necklace was returned, but because she learned the true circumstances of its disappearance. As a mother herself, Kate understood how a curious child might be drawn to beautiful jewelry, and her heart went out to both Lucas and his grandmother. The question now was how the royal family would handle this unprecedented situation. The theft had been solved, the jewelry recovered, and the culprit identified as an 8-year-old child with no criminal intent. However, the security implications could not be ignored, and palace officials debated the appropriate response. Sarah Mitchell was officially cleared of any suspicion and commended for her vigilance in discovering the theft. Her reputation was fully restored, and she received personal thanks from both Camilla and Kate for her dedication to duty. The experience had taught her that even the most unusual circumstances could test a security professional's skills and judgment. Meanwhile, the palace faced the delicate task of addressing Maria Santos's employment status. While her grandson's actions were innocent, the incident had exposed potential security gaps and raised questions about protocols for staff family visits. Maria feared the worst, expecting immediate termination and possible legal action. However, the royal family's response surprised everyone involved. After careful consideration and consultation with legal advisors, it was decided that Lucas's age and innocent intent warranted compassion rather than punishment. The family recognized that Maria was a hard-working single guardian who had raised her grandson while maintaining exemplary service to the palace. Instead of termination, Maria received a formal reprimand and was required to undergo additional security training. New protocols were established for staff family visits, including mandatory supervision and restricted access to certain areas of the palace. Maria was grateful for the second chance and committed herself to proving that the royal family's trust in her was not misplaced. Lucas Santos, for his part, was given a gentle but firm lesson about the importance of honesty and respecting other people's property. The child psychologists worked with him to understand why taking things that don't belong to you is wrong, regardless of how pretty or appealing they might be. Lucas wrote a heartfelt apology letter to Kate, expressing his sorrow for taking her necklace and promising never to take anything that wasn't his again. The case had an unexpected epilogue when Kate personally requested to meet Lucas and his grandmother. The meeting took place in a private room at the palace, away from media attention and official protocols. Kate wanted to ensure that Lucas understood the gravity of his actions while also showing him forgiveness and compassion. During their meeting, Kate spoke to Lucas about the significance of the pearl necklace and why it was so important to her. She explained that it represented love and family connections, and that taking it had made her very sad. However, she also praised Lucas for eventually telling the truth and helping to return the necklace, showing him that honesty was always the right choice, even when it felt scary. Lucas listened intently to Kate's words, his young mind processing the lessons about honesty, respect, and the consequences of our actions. By the end of their conversation, he had a better understanding of why his actions were wrong and felt genuinely sorry for the sadness he had caused. The incident led to comprehensive reviews of palace security protocols, particularly regarding access controls and visitor supervision. While the security systems had technically functioned correctly, the human element had created an unexpected vulnerability. New procedures were implemented to prevent similar incidents while maintaining the palace's traditional atmosphere of trust among long-serving staff members. Chief Inspector Reynolds used the case as a teaching moment for his security team, emphasizing that investigations must consider all possibilities, no matter how unlikely they might seem. The case of the 8-year-old jewel thief became a unique chapter in palace security history, and a reminder that sometimes the most complex mysteries have the simplest explanations. For Sarah Mitchell, the experience reinforced her commitment to thorough and professional security work. She continued her duties with renewed confidence, knowing that her vigilance and dedication had been validated by the successful resolution of the case. The incident also taught her the importance of keeping an open mind during investigations and considering all possibilities. As life at the palace returned to normal, the story of Lucas and the missing pearl necklace became a carefully guarded secret among those involved. The royal family's compassionate handling of the situation demonstrated their understanding that justice must be balanced with mercy, especially when dealing with children who make innocent mistakes. Maria Santos continued her work at the palace with even greater dedication than before, grateful for the second chance she had received. She implemented strict rules for Lucas about behavior and honesty, ensuring that he understood the importance of making good choices. Their relationship with the royal family had been tested, but ultimately strengthened by the experience. The pearl necklace was returned to its proper place among Kate's jewelry collection, but it now carried an additional story of forgiveness, second chances, and the importance of understanding human nature. The incident served as a reminder that even in the most secure and formal environments, the unpredictability of human behavior could create unexpected challenges that required wisdom and compassion to resolve properly.